Well, tonight we're with Snoopy. You can see he's in a writing mood. Tonight's video is going to be about conferring about your writing. A lot of you are to the point now where you've done your rough draft, you've done everything you can think of, and you've asked me, well, what do I need to do next? And so that's why we're going to talk about conferring tonight. There's three pieces of conferring. One is, how do you know when you're finished? How do you know when it's time for you to confer with someone else? The second piece is, how do you share that? How do you go about having a conference with someone? And the third piece of this is, what you should do if someone asks you to confer with their writing. And those are the things we're going to talk about on the tape tonight. The first thing we're going to look at is, how do I know if I'm ready to conference with someone? How do I know if my draft is really done? If I've done as much as I can do on my own? All right, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to begin by looking at the beginning of your draft. Begin at the beginning. All right, we're going to talk about the things that make good writing at the beginning. So first of all, is my piece focused? Do I have a thesis statement or my focus statement in the first paragraph? If not, you need to go back and revise for that. Somewhere in that first paragraph, there should be exactly what it is you're going to tell the reader in your piece. Do you also, the second piece is, have you written a good lead? Does it hook the reader in? Does it make them want to read more? If not, then you need to work on your lead before you ask someone else to read it. And finally, has my lead raised my reader's curiosity? Do you make them wonder about what's coming up? Are they thinking, I want to hear more beyond this first paragraph? If you can say yes to all of these, then you're going to keep on reading your paper. If any of these are no, then you have revision work to do. Okay, let's say that you've read through your beginning, there is a thesis in the first paragraph, your lead is really a good lead, it hooks the reader, it's interesting, it raises their curiosity, and you can keep on reading. Okay, so we're going to go on and we're going to go to the next part, and I will get this right in a minute. No. Okay, there you go. Ooh, and then I went too far. Great. It's there, see? After you've read the beginning, then you're going to go to the middle of the page, the middle of your piece. Okay, the middle is going to be where the concrete details are. So that's the first thing you have to think about. Is there enough detail? Can you go through and underline all of those concrete specific details? If you only have one or two concrete details, then you need to do some revision. There should be at least 2 or 3 details per topic, or they're not going to understand what you have to say. Have I given them enough information that's important? Is the information important? Have I tried to answer any questions they might have? Which means you're going to think about who's going to read this. What questions might they have, and have you answered them? Is there just enough information? Remember that too much is just as bad as not enough. So if you have too much information, if you find yourself repeating things, then you're going to go in and you're going to delete some of that stuff. And finally, have I found something new in my details? Is there something new I can show them about my topic? Is there some way that I can give them a new light to look at something? If I'm just giving them same old, if they can get the same information as they would get if they Googled it, then you still have revision work to do. But if the beginning is as it should be, and when you reread your middle, you find that you have more than enough concrete detail for your reader, and I mean concrete detail, that you have thought about all the questions that the reader's going to have and you've answered them, that you've gotten rid of any extra information, and that in the details your reader's going to learn something new, something different, then it's time to go on and look at the end. Okay, now you're going to look at the end, and this time, instead of looking at the lead, you're going to look at the conclusion. Does my conclusion tie up loose ends? Will the reader feel that the piece is finished? Does this feel like a logical place to stop? Will they feel like you gave them something to think about? Either you've tied up all the loose ends in a new way, or you've left them hanging in a way that ties up enough that they can stand to not have everything wrapped up. But whether you leave them hanging or whether you bring everything to a conclusion, it still has to be satisfying to the reader. Have I done that with my conclusion? Have I included just enough information in my conclusion? Have I connected it back to my lead so that they actually see why this conclusion works? Your Snoopy's music in the background. And finally, will my reader feel like their time was well spent? Have they learned something only my piece could have given them? When they're finished, are they going to think, wow, I never thought of that? Or is it going to be like, well, yeah, I knew that, so what? If it is revision to do. If not, you're ready to share. When I talk about sharing, a lot of you make a face at me and think, oh, I really don't want to share. But if our community of writers is going to work, then we have to have everybody sharing. And I share a lot with you on a daily basis, if you think about it. When you share, you're not just saying, what did I do wrong? You're also showing the other writers in the room. You're letting them see the kinds of things that you've done. You're giving them ideas about things that maybe they haven't thought about. You're showing them how to do the things you did well. You also help yourself. Remember that there aren't just one teacher in the classroom. There's 23 or 19 or however many students there are in our class, plus me. And that's important because every one of us brings something different. And finally, you teach other writers in the room by showing them how you handle challenges with your writing. Do you take advice well? Do you decide what to accept and what's valid? And do you decide what to leave and go on and do your own thing? They're all important lessons, and the only way you can learn these is if you're willing to share your writing. All right, so you've decided you're going to share and you know who you're going to ask to conference with you. What's next? What's next is that you need to prepare to sit down with the reader. First of all, you need to get comfortable sharing. Anything you're going to take to publication should be shared at least once or twice. Once could be with a peer and then with me, and I prefer you do peers first, please, before you ask to see me. So you need to get in the habit of sharing your papers. Secondly, you need to read through your paper so that you kind of know how the piece goes. You need to read it out loud to yourself so that you can see if there's places that are still bumpy or unclear even to you, so that when it comes time to sit down with your listener, it goes smoothly. And this is the second piece that this is another big piece I want to stress. You read your piece. Oops, I forgot read. There's my typo for tonight, guys. Write it down and you get candy for it. You read your piece to the reader. You don't hand it to them and make them try and figure out what your handwriting looks like. It's a rough draft. Give them a break. You need to hear it read out loud anyway. Number 3 is decide exactly what needs to be conferenced. If your piece is long, the whole piece probably doesn't need feedback. Pick the part that you needs that most needs some outside ideas. Think about 250 words. That's about a page or two. No more than that, please, because otherwise the conference is going to go long and you will have lost the focus and the whole point of why you meet. And the last thing is please be specific. Tell the reader what you want them to listen for. Are you worried about your lead? Are you worried about your conclusion? Do you think that your transition words don't work? Do you think that your paragraphs might not be in the right order? Do you think your details might not be concrete enough? As the reader, you own the piece. Where do you think the weaknesses are? Give the reader something to listen to. You wouldn't go to the doctor and make him guess what was wrong. And it's the same thing with one. And finally, if someone asks you to conference, first of all, think about it as a compliment. They actually think enough about either your writing skills or your listening skills to ask you to share this moment with them. Honor that, please. Give them your full attention. Listen carefully and be honest. Be sure when you sit down that you remember the purpose for the conference. The purpose is to help the writer. The purpose is not for you to show off. It's not for you to correct. There's a huge difference between a conference, a suggestion, and a correct. It is not for you to take over ownership of the piece. It's for you to listen and make the suggestions that they ask you for. Remember, the questions are most helpful. Try and ask good questions. If you don't understand something, ask a good question about it. If you're not sure what the message is, ask a very good, clear question about that. Questions are the most helpful for the writer when they go back, take the information, and try and apply it to their revision. The third, and this is critical, be specific and constructive. When you say to them, I like this, it's really good. Well, what does that mean, and how can I fix it? Good means absolutely nothing, except maybe it makes me feel good for a minute or two. I liked it. What does that mean? That doesn't give the writer anything. Instead of saying good, say, this kept me very interested. In the lead, when you said, I immediately began to wonder. Or, I enjoyed hearing the detail about the head in the roasting pan. Or, I liked your conclusion. It left me with a question I hadn't thought about. Also, if something doesn't work, be very specific and constructive about why it doesn't work. I didn't understand what your conclusion had to do with your lead. I didn't understand how one led to the other. I don't understand what paragraph 3 has to do with anything else in the paper. I'm not clear. What point did you want to make? I'm not sure. What do you want me to know when I'm finished reading this? There's nothing wrong with being constructive. And constructive is very different than being critical. Critical puts someone down with no options for improvement. And construction points out weaknesses and makes suggestions for improvement. We're looking for constructive, not critical. And finally, respect the writer's request. If they ask you to listen to the lead and you think that the conclusion is terrible, they didn't ask you about the conclusion. Respect what they've asked you to listen for. Give them feedback on what they said they needed feedback on and be done with it. It's not your paper. Finally, last little roundup of kind of little last-minute things that didn't fit under any of the first 3 categories. When, as a writer, you are ready to conference, you're going to sign up. There'll be a chart, and I'll show that to you in a day or two. There'll be a chart in the front of the room. You put a Post-it note with your name on it if you need someone to conference with, or a Post-it note with your name and the person you've chosen on the chart under your block for the day, and that tells me who's conferencing. Everyone's going to be given a handout of conference guidelines, things to think about, and both the reader and the writer are going to use this handout to help guide the conversation and keep the process moving smoothly. When you conference, you may not conference at the tables ever. No table talk. Tables are a place where they're silent. There has to be a place where people who can't do their homework with the radio on can go and know there's not going to be talking around them. So if you're conferencing, you're either going to move to the front of the room and sit on the floor or drag a couple of chairs up. Perhaps you'll go out in the hallway right outside the door if the time is right, but you may not conference at the table. Your voices need to be quiet so that you don't impose on other people. If you're too loud, I'll break up the conference and that'll be the end of it. Keep your conference to about 10 or 15 minutes, and the reason for this is if you spend the entire block conferencing, you've not given the writer any time at all to actually go and do something about what you've told them while the information is fresh. So about 15 minutes is the most, and I will call an end to the conference if you haven't finished. And finally, please make sure you keep good notes of the feedback you get. Oops. How'd that happen? I hit the button, I guess. Keep good notes of the feedback you've received. These could be Post-it notes that the reader makes notes on and gives to you. It could be a form. If you want a form, I have one printed up I can give to you. It could be notes that you take on your draft. But remember, when you turn this in as finished, there needs to be evidence of at least one conference and the feedback you received. So make sure that you keep good notes. Okay, a last couple of little general reminders about you as a viewer of my video. And this is video directions. I'll put this up here so you don't forget. Please remember I expect you to be an active viewer. If you need to pause, if you need to rewind, if you need to replay, I expect you to do that. I don't expect you to let this run while you watch TV. Been there, done that. You're not going to get the notes you want if that's what you do. Secondly, I expect you to take very good notes in your ISN. And I'm going to be more specific about what I want in the notes because I've noticed that some of your notes are pretty general. Your notes should include everything that's on the slides, that's on the video, with any extra clarifying notes to yourself, as well as anything that I might say that's important, written in your own words. You may use bullets, you can use an outline, you can use a graphic organizer, you can skip spaces. Do something so that you can actively access the notes. You want to be able to go back and look at this. You want to be able to access the information. And a solid paragraph of text isn't going to do it. Wouldn't do it for me, and I know it doesn't do it for you. And I'm going to be checking for these things when I check notes. As you're taking notes, if something confuses you or doesn't make sense, you need to make a note of it and label it with a question mark in the margin. And it also would help if you put down the timestamp. Where in the video did your question occur? So if we need to, we can run back and look at it. And finally, you need to remember to go back and post your summary to NiceNet. But this time, again, some of your summaries are pretty vague. And the summaries are, I use the summaries so I know what you understand about the video. I want you to answer the questions. I'm going to give you very specific questions for each video. You'll get a handout with these on it that you can glue in your notebook that'll give you the whole week at a glance. And I'll also post them each night in a directions box. Please make sure that your summary answers the 2 or 3 questions that I've asked you for to show me what you've gotten from the video, that you had some understanding of this video tonight. I hope you have a good evening and that you've enjoyed our little talk with Snoopy tonight. I will see you in class.